It's a privilege to welcome students, educators, families, and community members to today's Town Hall, an event that brings us together to connect, learn, and engage in meaningful dialogue. As Student Council President, I represent not only the student body, but also the values and spirit of our school. I work alongside my peers and school leaders to elevate student voices, foster school pride, and build a stronger, more inclusive environment. From organizing events that boost morale to tackling real issues that impact our school community, I've learned that leadership is about service, and that change begins when we listen, collaborate, and take action together. That's why today's town hall is so important. It gives us all, students, educators, families, and leaders, a chance to come together in a place where we can discuss challenges we face and the future we're building. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our former mayor, Secretary Emily Keller.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our town hall. Thank you, Grace, for the introduction. Congratulations on all you were doing. I was telling her backstage 21 years ago, I was the student council president across town at South High, so I'm very glad I didn't get struck by lightning or anything walking in the North High, but I'm happy to be here this evening. Before we begin, I just want to go over a couple ground rules, and before we do that, I wanted to acknowledge some elected officials that are with us today. If you could stand and be acknowledged, we do have former Mayor Takesha Martinez. We also had Commissioner Derek Harvey. Commissioner, are you here? Also joining us today is Robin Summerfield from Senator Van Hollen's office, and Julia Abelitz, former representative from Senator Van Hollen's office. Did I miss any former or current elected officials? I'm sorry? Oh, Senator also Brooks is here representing through Dan. Thank you for joining us. And also just want to give a shout out to the Hagerstown City Council members. They are in a 5-hour meeting tonight, or they would be here. So send them a positive thought as they get through a very long meeting. And as far as our ground rules, we want to make sure that this conversation is respectful and productive. Our members of Congress are here to answer the questions that you have. We do have staff all around the auditorium giving index cards on which you can write your question and hand it back to be read aloud. Unfortunately, we will likely not get to all the questions since we only have an hour tonight, but you can follow up with Congresswoman Delaney or Senator Van Hollen's office after the event. We're also here to participate in our democracy. Please know anyone causing a disruption will be asked to leave, but we do encourage you to cheer, to boo if you'd like, express your opinion. We just want to make sure that we keep it respectful and so everyone can enjoy this town hall. So thank you again for joining us. Please silence your cell phones if you haven't done that already. And it is my distinct honor now to welcome Congresswoman April McLean Delaney and Senator Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you.
So, hello, Hagerstown and Washington County. Thank you for having us here. That was quite interesting. So I'll take it like this. So it's been about 2 weeks since I was here for the hands-off rally, and I can tell you, I went on to Frederick and I said Hagerstown was on fire. Yeah. It was pretty incredible. But I just want to say thank you for showing up, because this is the most important part of democracy, is showing up and mobilizing and getting your opinions out there and organizing. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to Grace, wherever she is. I think she's incredible. I heard so many wonderful things that I do. And thank you to all the students in Hagerstown High School. And of course to Secretary Kelly for doing this, and the amazing Senator Van Hollen. So
thank you. Good to be here. Thank you.
So as I said, I was here for the hands-off rally, and I said I was furious and frustrated about the lawless and unbelievable actions that have happened in the 13 weeks that have happened since I swore into Congress. And I said then it felt like 13 months in dog years, because now it's starting to feel like 13 years. But it is a really hard time right now, because I hear from, I ran on a common sense, common ground platform. But you know what, as a member of Congress, I represent everyone, whether they voted for me or not. And I will tell you that these actions I'm seeing, whether it be in Medicaid, Social Security, cuts to SNAP, all of these different issues, the tariffs, they are impacting everyone. Farmers, kids, our seniors, our elders, those who are sick, anyone I'm talking to across the board is feeling fearful, frustrated, confused, and chaos. And so it has been a very hard time to be in Congress, but I'm there to fight for you. Our office is open, and we all, I said I'm a baby in training in terms of rallies at Senator Van Hollen and Senator Raskin. I'm not going to be quoting Thomas Paine, but I'll tell you, I am working 24/7, and I have to raise up our staff, who our congressional office, and Sunny Holding, my chief, is here. But we have all sorts of information at the back of the room in terms of resources for you. I represent 35,000 government workers, and our agencies at NIST, at the Fire Academy, at National Institute of Health, all of these different organizations that have been incredibly impacted with funding freezes, but also so many laid off. Some of them were probationary and reinstated, but so many workers that are looking for help and guidance. So please reach out to our staff. We have received now over 60,000 people have reached out to us, either through email or communications or calls, and it's over 4,000 a week. And we have gotten the bulk of them answered. In the last 3 weeks, I think we had 198 people from Hagerstown proper that reached out to us, and we are trying as much as we can to give resources, aid, because that is within our control. And we hear you, and we're fighting for you. But just lifting up what has happened, I'm just going to tell you what I've done in brief and then get to the questions. But, there was a terrible CR, a budget that came through that I voted against last week. And we know that we have to be more efficient and effective, and we do have to cut our deficit, and we do have to figure out ways we get off of this trajectory, because in the long term it hurts our U.S. competitiveness, our interest rates will go up, and it will be impactful. But the way it is being done is crazy. And in that, it's hurting people across the board. And I voted against it because I serve on the Ag Committee, and I saw $230 billion coming out of the Ag Committee, and I said, there's no way they can do it without SNAP funding, jeopardizing SNAP funding. And unfortunately, 23,000 people in this county use SNAP, and many of them are children. 22,000 kids in Washington County have free or reduced lunches. So that is a huge impact on the life and the health and well-being of kids and families in Washington County. And in addition, there were all of $880 billion to Medicaid. Okay, 50% of women in this country deliver on Medicaid. Many of the elderly live in nursing homes on Medicaid. And we have 137,000 in the Maryland 6th District on Medicaid. Things like this, we cannot allow to be cut. And then the last I have to say is rule of law. Rule of law. Senator Van Hollen and I are both blessed to be graduates of Georgetown Law Center. And I came here from Buell, Idaho. I'm a farmer's daughter. But I will say that the attacks this past 3 weeks by the Trump administration and going after law firms, taking and really coercing the top 10 most kind of powerful law firms in the country and coercing them into getting $1 billion of pro bono legal fees. And what is that going to be used for? Immigration? Is it going to be used for veterans? I don't know. But what it does is it has a chilling impact writ large on the legal system and undercuts the ability for everyone to get their day in court, particularly when that day in court might mean protecting your health, your well-being, your economic security, or God forbid, being deported out of the country. So, thinking about that, I'm helping lead a letter right now with Congressman Min to kind of step back and say, stop this, and start thinking about some of the conflicts. So I look forward, there's so many things to answer, but all I can say is, I'm your member of Congress. I'm here to fight for you. Our office will be there 24/7, and we are doing everything we can, and we will, and we are starting to make a difference in fighting back within the court system. It is a hard time when we vote as a bloc, and the other side of the aisle seems to outvote us each time. But we are going to change the public opinion and the court of public opinion. And we're going to push that so that those GOP members, and take it to them, they can no longer ignore what is happening across this country. So I am going to pass it to Senator Van Hollen, who I have so much tremendous respect for, member of the House for many, many years, an incredible member in the Senate, and a fighter, and someone I have enormous respect for. So, Senator Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, thank all of you for being here. Thank you, Grace, the president of the student body. Let's give it up again for Grace. And Emily, thank you for what you did in your earlier job and what you're doing now, the special secretary fighting opioid addiction. Let's give it up for Emily. And to April McLean Delaney, who hit the ground running and has been working hard every day for her constituents. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for organizing this great town hall. Thank you. And to all of you in this room, as Congresswoman Delaney said, we have an obligation as people who love our country and in this democracy to work very hard to save it. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I believe that we are facing a clear and present danger to the Constitution, to the rule of law, to our democracy, and to working people all over this country. And it is a moment where every American patriot does need to stand up and speak out and be counted. So thank all of you who are here fighting for our country. Now, I too want to get to the questions, but I want to tackle 3 areas quickly. The future of our ability to provide important services to the public in this country is under threat as we speak. Make no mistake, the Elon Musk operation has nothing to do with government efficiency. I mean, I know all of you in this room know if you really cared about government efficiency and going after waste in government, you don't start by firing all the inspector generals in the US government, do you? So this has nothing to do with making the government more efficient. I'm all for looking at reforms to help save taxpayer money and deliver good services to the American people. This is about rigging the government for very wealthy people like Elon Musk, and we cannot let them get away with it. Why else do you start by shutting down things like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right? Which returned billions of dollars to American consumers who've been cheated out of their money by con artists and fraudsters. They shut it down. If you look across the board, what they're doing is making it so that federal agencies don't have the capacity to deliver important public services. That is going to hurt the American people. Look what's happening at the Social Security Administration, right? First of all, you have Elon Musk saying this is a Ponzi scheme, when I think all of us in this room know it's a promise that we all have to keep to our fellow Americans. But they are going after the Social Security Administration, which is in the great state of Maryland, right? So first they said they were going to shut down telephone services for the Social Security Administration. They said, well, go to the field offices. Well, you go to the field offices, they want to shut down the field offices. And then if you show up at a field office, they want to cut thousands of people from the Social Security Administration. And by the way, they also tried to get very sensitive private information on every American from the Social Security Administration. Fortunately, the courts have said no to that. And we need to, and you can take example after example across the federal government where they're taking literally a chainsaw to important government services. I don't know if you remember, but Elon Musk was actually here in Maryland, right? He was down in Prince George's County for the CPAC conference, and he was wielding a chainsaw out there. They were trying now, they realized that that was not a good look. Now they claim they're taking just a scalpel to the federal government. This is not a scalpel, it is a chainsaw. It's what they said, and they are working to dismantle these federal agencies, and in the process, they've illegally fired thousands of federal employees, and we need to stand up for these patriots who are delivering public services to the American people every day. And the lawlessness continues. You have 130, at least, suits filed in federal district courts around the country for everything from illegal impoundments. And by the way, just earlier today, I was meeting with some farmers in Frederick who are a very important part of the food to schools program, the farm to schools program. And this is an important way to obviously grow local foods, helps the local farmers, fresh foods, also help provide our kids with nutritious meals. Their funds were frozen by the Trump administration. They're talking about discontinuing the program. That's just one of many. That's just one of many, and that's why you see so many lawsuits. Now, we know that this is about providing tax cuts for the very wealthy and big corporations at the expense of everybody else, because when we both get back to the House and Senate, that's going to be the first order of business. We both opposed the so-called budget resolutions in the House and the Senate. So these begin to create the framework for what they want to do next, which is a round of tax cuts for big corporations, the wealthy. And as Congresswoman Delaney pointed out, they're targeting for their cuts to partially pay for these. They're going to run up the debt big time. But they want to partially pay for these by cutting the food nutrition program, SNAP, and the House bill is very clear in its directions about going after Medicaid, which of course helps millions of Americans, kids with disabilities, people in nursing homes, and other people for their affordable health care. That's what they're targeting to pay for these tax cuts for the wealthy. So on top of all that, you have these across-the-board tariffs. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but I think all of you know that it's a pure lie to say that consumers don't end up having to foot the bill for across-the-board tariffs. These are I was just talking to some farmers who are already feeling it in terms of the additional prices they're paying for their inputs, and they're feeling that they are losing business as we speak because of the uncertainty in the economy. This is a self-inflicted wound on the economy. I have supported targeted strategic tariffs in certain sectors in the past, but across-the-board tariffs, like on Canada and our big enemy to the north, Canada, real threat, and that is going to hurt every consumer. And finally, the threat to the rule of law. as Congresswoman Delaney mentioned, these efforts to go after law firms, and I want to applaud all the law firms who have stood up to the bullying of the Trump administration. And I would say shame on those who have not stood up to the Trump administration. And I also want to salute the universities and colleges who are standing up to a lawless effort to shut down First Amendment rights and try to dictate to colleges. You know, the First Amendment right protects speech, whether we like it or we don't like it. Donald Trump wants to protect his speech, but he wants to punish colleges who don't agree with them on certain issues, and that is not acceptable in the United States of America.
That's right.
And finally, and some students that you probably saw were just disappeared. You know, Ms. Ozturk just disappeared in Louisiana. And then speaking of other people being disappeared, I see some signs here for Abrego Garcia, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And I want to be really clear about this. The Trump administration themselves admitted in federal court that he was wrongfully abducted from the United States. They called it an error, an administrative error that landed this person who has never been charged with a crime, who's here legally, who has a family, three kids, a wife, his mother's here in Maryland too, his brother, and he is now sitting in a notorious prison in El Salvador, and all of us are going to work very hard to bring him home. Because I will tell you what authoritarian regimes do. They start by picking on the most vulnerable. And you know, they're counting on people saying, well, we don't really care about that person or this other person. They're vulnerable. They come after the most vulnerable. And I will tell you, everybody else, when you start surrendering your due process protections and your legal rights and your day of court, it is a very short path to tyranny in the United States of America. So we are going to fight them in the courts, in the Congress, and in communities all over the country, and we count on all of you to help build these ripples that will create waves around the country, and they are feeling it right now. They're beginning to feel it, but we need to make sure that we keep the pressure on, that we keep standing up, that we keep speaking out. Thank you all for being here. Congresswoman Delaney, thank you.
Senator Van Hollen, you kind of touched on this, but his question is, what is so bad about the tariffs and what is being done?
Well, first of all, a tariff is a tax in its own way, and that it is passed on to the consumer, and it is a terrible thing. But what it is doing is this red light, green light, stop and go chaos that is happening with the Trump administration is not targeted and nuanced. It is in fact up to the whim, capricious fancy of Donald Trump. And what is really bad is that it's impacting and causing great economic uncertainty, disrupting supply chains. It is hurting our farmers. I, like Congressman Van Hollen, I have met with every farm bureau in all of my 5 counties. I met with the last one yesterday in Montgomery County, but I was up here in Washington County. And yes, they don't know what to plant. They don't know if they're, internationally, if they're going to be able to have a market because of the tariffs. They don't, all of the increased costs that are starting to hit them. But this is also for small businesses. Small businesses are saying they're not going to be able to make it because they aren't sure they're going to be able to turn a profit. And there is a great and growing conviction that this might trigger a recession. So in all ways, this chaotic back and forth, which is a self-inflicted wound, which is what I think Senator Van Hollen said, is terrible policy, but it's hurting everyone. Small businesses, individual families, and these working families, the Trump administration campaigned on lowering grocery costs and working on affordability, and this is going to increase grocery costs, going to decrease affordability, and I think Whirlpool just laid off 1,000 people because they didn't, all corporations are now starting to belt tighten in advance of a possible recession. So in all ways, this is foolish policy, and it hurts working families, and it's definitely going to have an impact across the 6th district.
Yeah, I would just add, as Congresswoman Delaney said, as you know, when you apply a tariff, it is the small business that is, American small business, that is importing something for their product here that has to pay that extra cost, which they, of course, then have to pass along to consumers. And then there's the flip side of this, which we should also remember, which are retaliatory tariffs. And the reality is, countries are not just going to stand by while the United States smacks big tariffs on products they're exporting to the United States. They're going to apply tariffs to products the United States exports overseas. And of course, China, for example, has responded with big tariffs. And I just want to remind people that during the first Trump administration, when they levied big tariffs on China, China responded with their own tariffs, which hit a lot of U.S. agricultural producers, farmers especially, that no longer could export their goods into China at affordable prices. And you may remember what happened. All of you taxpayers spent $28 billion to bail out farmers who'd been damaged through no fault of their own from these tariffs. And what the farmers always said to us was, look, we don't want the subsidy, we don't want the bailout, just don't hurt us in the first place by starting a trade war.
Oh, and I will say both the senator and I believe that the president should, this is not an emergency. And I am supporting legislation that takes back tariff power to Congress. I mean, Congress should have the ability to set tariffs, not a wayward president.
We have that bill in the Senate too. We actually have about 6 or 7 Republican senators on it, but if we get it out of the Senate, which will be a challenge, but we're going to push very hard, we need the Speaker of the House to bring it up, right? Exactly.
Our next question says, I'm very concerned about the mostly non-criminal human beings being held in El Salvador. Any of us could be kidnapped next. What can the American people do about this?
Do you want to go first, Emma?
So look, we need to call out the lies that are coming straight out of the Trump administration, straight out of the president's mouth, straight out of his top people. All of us work to make sure that people who commit crimes are held accountable. I have been working since before Donald Trump ever heard of MS-13 to work to stop MS-13 in Maryland and other parts of this region, because MS-13 has been a very malicious gang that has caused problems. But if you listen to the Trump administration, you would think that all of these people being deported are people who are engaged in criminal activity with MS-13. They are lying through their teeth. So when it comes to Abrego Garcia, and again, I want to emphasize that he was here legally. Number 2, he has never been charged with a crime. He has never been convicted, of course, of any crime. But the Vice President of the United States tweeted out that he'd been convicted of a crime. And all of the people around the Trump administration are putting out the big lies. So when you hear this, the first thing you need to tell people who say that is that they are just flat out lying, which is why the federal court determined that he had been wrongfully, illegally abducted and taken out of the country. And it's also why, when faced with questioning from a judge, the Trump administration lawyers had to admit that to the judge. And it's why the Supreme Court, by a 9-0 opinion, you don't get many of those these days, 9-0 opinion, said that the Trump administration had to facilitate his return to Maryland. And they are clearly ignoring a direct court order, which is why we were already in the gray zone of a constitutional crisis. But when they start disobeying direct court orders, we are in a whole different world. And we gotta, this is why we're gonna push back everything. So,
I think to Senator Van Hollen's point, and I hear it in the audience, it's true. I mean, this is awful, and we have to make sure that the Supreme Court and the district court orders are enforced and that he is brought home, and at all costs, and that we, and even if we and how we do it, I think, is by growing conviction, but also, I think, by us pushing the levers, because this is, according to a CNN poll, something like, I think it was 92% of Americans across the board, Republican, Democrat, Independent, believe that that you cannot ignore court order and that there must be rule of law. And so, I think that does make a difference. But with respect to even the broader issue of immigration and these ICE raids, they have to stop. This is unbelievable, and it is unlawful, and we have to push back.
well, I don't even know if we announced this, but I am planning tomorrow to go to El Salvador to work to bring him home. Thank you. Thank you.
I had heard that, but I didn't know that was public, so. Yes.
Yes, so there's a question about paying them, which is a very good point, because, as you know, the Trump administration is essentially paying the government of El Salvador, we believe, around $15 million to take these individuals, which puts a lie to two things, right? It puts a lie to the Trump administration saying they can't facilitate him coming home because all they have to do is stop paying the bill. And secondly, it's pretty clear that the government of El Salvador has the power to release him. So this is an incredible, worse than a miscarriage of justice, which is why we are not going to rest until this person gets justice and due process and bring him home.
We better go on to the next question, because I know it's a lot.
I'm very passionate about this. I'm fired right now, too. We have a lot of questions to get through, so if we could just keep it moving.
Claims awaiting.
Here, so we're going on to the next one.
The Lincoln Riley Act.
Have a student at WCPS named Jaden who has a question for you. It says, recently our education system has been under attack by President Trump. What is being done to defend education public? That's from a student. Thank you.
I think that is an incredible question, and it is so important, because if you think about it, who could believe when people said Project 2025, and he said, I'm going to abolish the Department of Education, and everyone went, oh, and then he did it. And what you have to realize is when Trump says he's going to do something, he does go after it, and it's terrible. I think what we have to do, that the DOE funding is going to hit hard, because it's going to be something that is, if you look at it, 15% of the Washington County School District funding comes from the federal government. I mean, that is a huge hit. And what that is a huge hit is on not only career and technical training and Future Farmers of America, but it's also our special needs kids. Those kids who really need that extra help in schools. And the other part is that, it triages down. It's not just the federal funding, but then it has a big tsunami effect also on the state budget and how the state budget is funding it. And so these two confluence together make a huge, huge difference. I think the pushback in is that, we cannot allow the DOE funding to go away, and that we have to push back, and there's got to be a lot from not only, in Washington County, which, has, a democratically elected member who is supporting it, but it's also going to, the Freedom Caucus and Andy Harris and others across the country, and highlighting in those GOP districts how those funding issues are going to hit them hard. But I think it is, working with our, our state budget, leaning in and making sure that we have the funding dollars we need for them. But it is, this is a very dynamic area that has just come up in the last week and a half, but we are definitely diving in. And I know there is a select committee, that we have gotten a task force within the House to really look at it and hit back in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. I would just add, we are fighting this in the courts, and one of the things I spent a lot of time doing, and we spent a lot of time doing, is talking with the lawyers that are bringing many of these cases. I was just on a Zoom call earlier today.
And for the universities too. And for,
What's that?
And higher education.
And higher education as well, right? So who are bringing these very important cases, and the side of the law is winning in many of these cases. For example, the effort to dismantle NIH, although they are still hurting NIH, their efforts to go after their funding formula was stopped by the courts. So the courts are an important line of defense. However, when it comes to, for example, trying to fully dismantle the Department of Education, this next appropriations bills year in the Congress are going to be very important. So I also voted against the continuing resolution because I thought that it provided just a continuing license to Elon Musk and the illegal activities that they're all engaged in. But as we put together the budget for the coming fiscal year, that will be when Republicans in the Senate and the House are going to have to decide whether they're going to accept and embrace cutting the Department of Education in half, gutting very important programs that benefit their constituents, including, for example, big cuts at the Department of Veterans Affairs. So they're going to have to decide whether or not they're going to be complicit in what so far the Trump administration and Elon Musk have been doing unilaterally. So this is going to be a very important couple of months, both because of what I was talking about, their tax cuts for the rich, cutting Medicaid plan is going to be advanced, but also they'll be working to advance their budgets for the next fiscal year, which begins on October 1st of this year. So a lot all goes back to why it's so important that people be expressing themselves and making their voices known, and that you talk to anybody you know anywhere else in the country and make sure they're making those phone calls too. Because I think you all remember the Affordable Care Act, right? The Affordable Care Act repealed during the first Trump administration. The effort to kill it did pass the House of Representatives. And as you may recall, it failed, the effort to kill it failed by just one vote in the United States Senate. Every Democrat, plus Senator Collins and Senator Murkowski, and of course, John McCain with the thumbs down. But that happened because of people like all of you all over the country said, keep your hands off our Affordable Care Act. And now it's keep our hands off of Social Security, Medicaid, and all these other important services.
And the only thing I'd add is, and people have heard me say this before, but on the House floor I heard the choice was between angry Trump and angry voters. And they've gone with Trump so far, but they're starting to hear increasingly angry voters in these GOP districts. And we have to keep on putting the pressure on, because the more they find it, and they really are starting to get into a box.
You could please explain the details of the SAVE Act and why people say it's good.
The SAVE Act is a very bad piece of legislation, which at its heart, it purports to make sure that only Americans are voting, but what it's really doing is trying to disenfranchise millions and millions of voters across this country. And it's a terrible piece of legislation. And what's really awful is that it makes you go in person, takes away register by mail and voter drives to vote, to register in person with either a passport or a birth certificate. And I will tell you, my dad, God bless his soul, he died in 2018. He was born in the mid-1930s at home. He didn't have a birth certificate. And later in his life, he wanted to go to Europe. He'd gone to Canada or Mexico because you used to be able to go with a driver's license. He couldn't get a passport because they couldn't fabricate that birth certificate. But also millions of women like me who have a different married name, McLean Delaney, as opposed to April McLean. To go back and try and get all the paperwork, what it does is it puts additional hurdles and really serves to try and disenfranchise those who are most vulnerable and who are most feel threatened, but also just to make it really difficult. It's a terrible piece of legislation, and I voted against it. Chris voted against it, but
well, we will. So I amen to everything Congresswoman Delaney just said. This is a bill that's designed to disenfranchise American citizens from voting and targeting people who can't produce the particular kinds of proof of citizenship that they want. But as all of you know, it's already illegal for non-citizens to vote in the United States in federal elections. This is not a big problem at all. They're concocting this in order to come up with this plan to prevent millions of citizens from voting. So I can assure you of this. I will assure you that we will block this bill in the United States Senate.
amen.
Next question is very important to a lot of us. How secure is Medicare and Social Security?
Well, we're going to make sure it's protected. I think Medicare and Social Security is something that is not an entitlement. People earned it, and they paid for it their entire young lives. And it is obscene that Social Security would be threatened. And it is something that many people care about. I think what's really difficult right now is that they are trying to undermine it through funding cuts, through defunding resources, closing offices. They even tried to get rid of, make people have to go into the office and take down the phone line. But if you notice, what happened is they had a proposal to not allow you to call in. And there was such a public outcry across the country, they dialed it back. So that says something. Vocal people who stand up and say, hell no, it makes a difference. And that's what we have to do. But it isn't, they're undermining the resources for both Medicare and Social Security. And we have to say no. And I know that in my district, it is, I think, there are 137,000 people on Social Security.
Yeah. It's been a long time Republican goal to privatize Social Security, right? They tried this during I remember they tried to do this during the Bush administration, Bush 2. They tried to privatize Social Security. We defeated it. They also tried to voucherize Medicare. That was a big part of Congressman Paul Ryan's budget plan, was to turn that into a voucher whose value would diminish over time, so your Social Security, your Medicare benefits would diminish over time. We were able to defeat both of those efforts. I agree with Congressman Delaney. What they're trying to do now, like with Social Security, is make it harder and harder for people to access their payment. Let's say you have a question. You want to call them on the phone. You can't get through. And you know, after a while, when no one's responsive to your calls or to your email, then people begin to go, oh, well, maybe we do need to privatize Social Security. So this is an effort, in my view, to try to discredit Social Security by eating away at its ability to deliver benefits, not go after the benefits directly, but the ability to deliver a benefit. And obviously, a benefit doesn't do anybody any good if they can't be delivered. So we need to fight back very hard on this. I do think in this moment of the biggest target that they have is Medicaid, in terms of actually cutting deeply in the Medicaid, which is, they have it targeted in the House version at about $880 billion over 10 years. So that will hurt tens of millions of people across the country and in Maryland. And I will say that one of the groups that was able to help save the Affordable Care Act were families and kids with disabilities, because what that did, what the Affordable Care Act did, was help people with pre-existing conditions, all sorts of pre-existing conditions. And one of the major harms that would have been done from that repeal was to people with disabilities, and that will be one of the major harms if you go after Medicaid, in addition to people in nursing homes and many other people whose health care is provided. So this will be the fight, and there are Republican senators who are already worried about having to vote for this. In the Senate, we need four senators. In the House, you need how many House members? Three.
I need 3.
So
to keep, you know, it's interesting, in terms of Social Security, Congressman Larson has a very bipartisan approach that deals with, you pay into Medicare, right, until about 130, Social Security until about 60-some thousand.
Now,
And
takes
then
the cap
you
off.
don't pay until you get to about 400 to 450,000, and then start paying into it again, so that those who can afford to pay into it will pay their fair share in keeping it solvent.
there is a bill. I introduced this bill in the Senate with some other co-sponsors. Happy to talk to you, but it does get Social Security to solvency, because you're absolutely right. Right now, if you look in 2034, 2035, if we don't do anything on Social Security, it will not be able to pay for the full benefit. It'll be about 80%, and it'll go down. So, well, that is what
Doing fair
that is
share.
what a lot of what that bill does.
Okay, you all, what we're trying to do is to, and I, for any of the questions we don't get to tonight, and I know Senator Van Hollen has to leave at the end of the hour, I am so happy. Send me emails, contact my office, and we will answer all of the questions. But in the fairness of time, we are trying to have a process where we're taking these questions and having them channeled to get through as many questions as possible. So,
Guys, one last question, since we are running out of time. This next one hurts my heart to even ask, but it's from an 11-year-old named Aaron who is concerned. So Aaron asks, should he be fearing about his future as an 11-year-old? And is there anything my generation can do to help spread awareness?
Aaron, is that Aaron's name? So Aaron, I have 4 daughters from 17 to 31, and I just became a grandma. For my oldest, baby Charlie, born on December 27th, and I ran because of my kids. The future, it's not about me, it's about the future of our kids and our grandkids. And I will take whatever vote it is that I need to make sure that that future is brighter and more equitable and more prosperous. But I think that the hope is really in these kids, and being fearful, I think we can't be fearful at this time. I think, that is what the Trump administration wants to do. They want to cause fear in all of us. They want us to step back. They want us to be silent. They want us not to step up and to defend the values that we are as citizens, the respect for our democracy. And so I say that they're not to have fear, but that if anything, stepping forward, I'm seeing a lot of hope, but it's going to be a choppy water. But for kids like Aaron, I would say that it is I believe that in the end, through this choppiness, that our courts are going to hold, and that the American people are going to say enough, and we're going to flip back the House in 26, and we're going to put some darn bumpers and safeguards on what we were seeing and the takedown of what we're seeing. But to have hope and to study hard and to lean into community.
Don't leave early. Stay and answer all our
Yeah, so
And we will answer everybody's questions.
To Aaron, I agree with everything Congresswoman Delaney said, that all of us are here because we love our country and we want to fight for the country that we love. And as an 11-year-old living through this very, very turbulent period, I think it is a moment for all of us to go back to some of the basic principles that we believe in this country. We have tried over a long time to build a more perfect union. We have not done it in a straight line, but I do believe that together we can, as Dr. King said, bend that arc of justice. This is a very difficult time to be having to make that journey, but I do believe as well that if we all stand up and push hard, that we can protect the country that we love. And so to every 11-year-old here, let's just work with your fellow students. You can organize too.
And one more thing I'm going to say, and I hear this, I hear the anger and the fear. People are mad because they're angry, they're fearful. And we're angry, and we're furious as well. But, I said in Frederick, we cannot allow this anger to divide us and to divide each other and to start attacking each other, because that is going to be no good. I'm part of the New Dems, but they say diversity is our strength, unity is our power, and we have to be unified. We are a diverse country, but we have to unify and we have to support the values that we know are about being inclusive and equitable and creating that brighter tomorrow. And it is a really hard time, and I hear you. I promise, and I think we're going to take one more question or two, but I don't know. I promise that anyone who has a question and it is unanswered, if you reach out to my team, we will reach back to you, or else I will reach personally back to you. So they're not going to be unanswered. It's very difficult, but as I said, we've had over 60,000 people, and we respond. So if we can go ahead.
Thank you. We actually have one last question, but it's just a statement, and it came from our audience tonight. It says, thank you for coming and all that you do. So I want to thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. we will, I mean, I know that you're upset, I know that there's a lot, but we have to, we are dealing with a lawless administration and with a takedown of a lot of the things that we believe must be sustained. And we will, and we will fight for you, and we are going to persevere. We are going to stand up, and we are not going to fold. And so, but it takes all of us. All of us. It's not 435 members of Congress and 100 senators. It's our whole darn country who comes and says, we're rolling in on this together. It's not just me. What are you going to do, April? It's what the frick are we all going to do to make sure that we preserve this? So I'm here, and our office is open, and get your materials, but we are here, and we will respond. And I just want to give it to our amazing senator.
Well, thank you all for being here and standing up as patriots. As I said, we have to fight this in the courts, we have to fight this in Congress, and we have to fight this in communities all over the country, because it's only when we have that unity of purpose that we can create those ripples and that wave to take back and save the country that we love. Thank you all for being here.